Good afternoon and welcome to today's Planning Committee. This is not a public meeting, but a meeting the public can attend. I'm Councillor Susan Durant, I'm Chair of the Planning Committee, and before we commence I'd like to outline the domestic arrangements for the meeting. We're not expecting a fire practice today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the building by way of the fire exit through the doors at the rear of the chamber. Proceed down the stairway and exit through the emergency exit on the ground floor. If there is anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs, where the emergency evacuation lift is located, and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the lift doors to call for assistance. The designated assembly point is in the public square in front of Cass Beyond the Fountain. I'd like to inform members of the public and press that today's meeting will be audio-visually recorded. By entering the council chamber, you accept that you will be recorded and your images retained and broadcast by the council on its website and on YouTube. If anyone intends to record or film any part of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting and you only focus on recording those people participating. Please ensure that your mobile phones are turned to silent mode, please. May I remind anyone speaking in the meeting that you will need to press the large red button underneath the microphone and ensure the red light is illuminated. This will ensure that you are being recorded. The meeting is proceeding today on the basis that all members of the committee have read their agenda papers thoroughly and are aware of what they will be considering. If any member of the committee leave the chamber during consideration of an application, they should ensure they do not take part in the vote on their return. They will not have heard all the relevant information on that particular item. Thank you. Item 1 on today's agenda is apologies for absence, and we've received apologies from Councillor Andy Pickering and from Councillor Duncan Anderson.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2 is the exclusion of the public and press. There are no exempt items on today's agenda. Item 3, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Thank you. Item 4 are the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of August. Can these minutes be moved as a true and accurate record? Is there a mover? And a seconder? And is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, that fetches us through to the item of the applications. Application 1, 23/00108/FUL is the conversion of existing dwelling with erection of rear extension to create 7 one-bed HMO units and conversion of rear outbuilding to create a one-bed apartment at 18 Lifford Road in Wheatley, and Mark Ramsey is the planning case officer, and Mark will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, this application relates to a proposed house of multiple occupation at 18 Lifford Road in Wheatley. This application was deferred at the last planning committee in order for members to visit the site, and this happened last Friday on the 15th of September. The application was deferred for the following reasons: to consider the access for Unit 2, particularly with regards to going through the living room, bin storage, internal storage and size, outbuilding security concerns and parking. No external alterations are, well, just to give you a refresh on what the application is about, no external alterations are proposed to the front elevation. However, 2-storey extensions proposed to the rear of the building. All the parking provision on Lifford Road is provided on street, and the proposal does not include any dedicated parking spaces for occupiers. Objections haven't been raised by the Highways team due to its sustainable location. The proposal originally sought permission for 8 beds, but following comments from the environmental health, the scheme was reduced in order to provide an acceptable standard of accommodation in terms of space, light, ventilation inside the building. Lifford Road has a uniform character consisting of 2-storey terrace housing. majority of the properties are red brick. All the properties have bay windows to the front at the ground level, and a small minority of the built dwellings have extended up into the roof space, including this one. Most of the properties on the same side of Lifford Road have small courtyard gardens to the front, which can be used for bin storage. This property is at the end of the terrace, so there's a footway along the side of the property that serves to provide external access to the rear of the property and storage, and has an alleyway to the rear of the property. Since the previous meeting, minor changes have been made to the internal layout, so the access to Unit 2 is from the hallway rather than the shared living space. So we can see that on the floor plans. So if we, there we are, where the arrow is, there's now a doorway from the hallway into Unit 2. Sizes on the layout plans is for the whole unit and therefore is inclusive of the ensuite. However, the standard at Doncaster seeks to achieve 10 square metres, so would be compliant in terms of achieving an HMO licence. The converted outbuilding is considered against the National Described Space Standards, and the unit provides 48 square metres of internal space. This exceeds the minimum standards of one bed unit, or exceeds the other requirements for bedroom size and storage. So when we were there, we also looked at the rear courtyard. So we saw that there's sufficient, circulation space for bin storage, and also the condition that would require a scheme for cycle storage to promote active travel. Internal storage wise, it's not a great deal that can be done on that. But the standard for an HMO, sets a minimum so that any personal belongings, have to be accommodated inside each bed space. In terms of the outbuilding, that has also been changed since it was originally put in front of you. So we've got the elevations there, which no longer include opening out the rear to the alleyway. So we've just got the openings, the three windows and the door opening to the courtyard, the shared courtyard with a house. And then on the floor plan, you can see that the rear doorway's been eliminated from that part of the proposal. As for parking, obviously members saw the saw the allocated spaces on the street. They've got time limit during the day, and it is possible then to apply for permitting parking during the day through the relevant council scheme. But in terms of impact on highways officer, they've not raised any objections to that because of its sustainable location. Which if I just go to the wider map, you can see that's relatively close to both Beckett Road and Thorne Road and the hospital. And you've got shops, doctors, dentists, etc. On those main arteries into the town, relatively close by to the site. So, and then there's also frequent bus services into the town centre from both those roads. Sorry, I'll have a look at the. Policy 9 is key to the determination of this application, which deals specifically with HMOs. It sets certain standards for the number of HMOs in a stretch of road. As you see here, there's no other HMOs actually currently along Lifford Road. There's one or two on the surrounding streets. The site is within a run of more than 20 houses, so there could only be one more HMO possible on that side, on the same side of the street, and also the the policy also requires that has other requirements that prevent clustering of HMOs within the same street, so there couldn't be another one literally next door, and you couldn't sandwich a regular house between two HMOs. So that's in the policy if any more came forward. So as I said, using the data which I've pulled off from the map, it's compliant with Policy 9 in that context. And it's important to highlight that local national planning policy promotes the housing mix to support a variety of market demand, to support different needs within the community. So to wrap this up, the proposals considered in the context of the presumption in favour of sustainable development set out in the MPPF, and the harms highlighted significantly outweigh the benefits identified when considered against the policies in the framework. Proposals is compliant with the adopted development plan and adopted policies, and therefore proposals recommended for approval.
Thank you for that, Mark. We've got Mr. Richard Maddox, is a local resident that's requested to speak in opposition to the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the red button when you want to speak and press it again to mute the microphone when you've completed your submission, and we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to again share the concerns of Lifford Road and specifically the residents of number 20. We all still feel strongly this is the wrong proposal for this area, specifically due to its scale, the potential for noise disturbance and the waste environmental issues. Therefore, we ask the committee to consider the impact before making a decision. As you'll have seen at first hand that the proposed HMO is to be centred in a traditional terraced house street, with 20 Lifford Road being directly adjoined to the proposed new development. Therefore, number 20 has the potential to be impacted the greatest during the development and after completion. As you'll have seen, the HMO is designed to maximise the number of bedsits it can possibly cater for on the existing terraced house footprint, and the sole focus of the design has been to ensure that the maximum number of rentable units is maintained by ensuring all the rooms, including the shared communal areas, just meet minimum planning obligations and the needs of the National Planning Policy Framework. Therefore, planning and environmental health will have the ability and the security to state that this development does meet minimum standards. But the National Planning Framework also states its aims are to achieve a healthy place that does not undermine the quality of life or community cohesion. Our concerns have always been about the scale of the development and the potential associated adverse impact of such a large conversion. The development is designed around 8 individuals sharing what is a terraced house property. Currently, 4 of the proposed bedsits are to be against the adjoining property wall of 20 Lifford Road, whilst planning state that the internal standards must meet the requirements for licensing, including a scheme for noise insulation of the party wall to mitigate any noise transfer. I would like to reiterate it says mitigate, not eliminate noise transfer. Surely, by design, to maximise the number of bedsits, to have 4 self-contained units on the adjoining wall, 5 if you include the actual loft conversion, are we just not accepting the potential for the increased noise transfer and reducing the quality of life of the existing residents at number 20? The question is, has the design been to cater for maximum revenue and income by maximising the number of bedsits, benefiting the landlord and not the welfare of the tenants or the neighbouring residents? A development should not be designed to meet minimum requirements and guidelines to provide maximum returns. It should promote unity of household relationships and community. Within the design, there are only 2 rooms which are not bedsits, which is a kitchen and living and communal areas. The principal purpose of these communal areas are to have enough space to store possessions, cook safely, socialise and entertain friends. The plan shows the kitchen is to be 14 square metres in size, without any units, fridges, freezers, washing machines, dishwashers and waste refuge that will be needed to meet the requirements of a HMO kitchen for 8 people. This equates to 1.75 square metres of space per tenant. The living room is 15 square metres and provides 1.8 square metres of space before any seating, dining table or TVs. Will it not be the case that each tenant will end up sleeping, living and socialising within their own bedrooms? And will this not increase the rise of noise disturbance
1 minute
and
remaining.
noise transfer from the 4 bedsets through the adjoining walls? Naturally, the volume of waste generated increase, therefore, will be larger, and the space required is not unsurmountable. Therefore, the proposal also requires for cycling storage and facilities for 8 tenants. The simple fact of waste storage and the space required for cycle storage will make the actual communal space dramatically compromised. I ask the committee to reflect, has the development been designed to maximise the number of tenants that comfortably can fit in the space, and converting 2 rooms on the ground floor, first floor and loft, and the rest all into bedsits, and in addition converting the garage at the end of the garden to obtain another bedsit, while still trying to fit in space for management of cycles, waste and social outdoor space. If the committee feels that by supporting such a development it can ensure the existing residents at 20 Lifford Road and the community will not be adversely impacted from noise or any antisocial behaviour, waste management issues or reducing privacy or any parking issues and the welfare of the tenants, if not, it should consider if this is the right proposal for the area.
Thank you for that, Mr Maddox. That's 5 minutes. Do any committee members have any questions that they would like to ask? No? Thank you for your submission. Committee members, we're now going to go into debate. Does any member wish to comment on the report or ask the planning case officer a question? Any questions? No? Okay, is there a proposal? Bob? Okay.
Yeah, it's the permit thing, just so I can get my head around it a bit more. So how do permits work with HMOs? Because I know I've never applied for a permit, so I'd imagine each household can apply for 2, whatever. So will every resident be able to apply for a parking permit in a HMO?
That might be a question for Andy. Not aware.
I don't know the specifics of our parking enforcement and parking arrangements. You'll have to go to our parking section. They deal with all the permits and they'll probably have a maximum total. So it will be on a demand basis, I assume. So I've not asked them specifically about that. So unless it's a question you want me to try and get an answer to.
Would be a good question to have an answer to, yeah.
But it's just one of those things that I don't know the situation regards the number of permits allowed per street because, like I say, it's not my area of expertise. So it's the parking enforcement section that deal with that, our parking section. Sorry.
Thank you for that, Councillor Anderson, but I agree with what you're saying, that I think it's important to know regarding the parking permits, and it would also be pertinent, I think, as well to the application to know if there's actually any space for permits on that street, because obviously it will impact parking. So I think we do need to know because there may not be any availability. Are you able to see if you can find that out?
I can find that out, but there are no specific parking requirements for HMOs. So back to policy, we don't have a specific HMO parking requirement policy. So just to make you aware of that. So the only thing that actually deals with HMOs and parking requirements is within policy 9.
Yes, so there could be at least 7 cars there. And also just a question on guests. Can guests stay indefinitely? Like, you know, partners, family, can they stay indefinitely in the HMO? Because that would obviously create more noise, more parking issues, more permits.
I mean, my understanding is the licensing is that a license is for a specific number of individuals to occupy the unit, so there shouldn't be, you know, these are 1-bed units, so I mean that's what they're licensed for. Obviously, if that's, I mean that's occurring. If a different situation is occurring more regularly, and you know there were complaints, that would be up to you know whether, you know, for colleagues to look into whether there's a breach of that license. but that's not the intention of this sort of accommodation.
So there's not really a definite answer on that one either then, is there?
Can I just add, that's definitely a licensing issue, not a planning issue. So that would be covered by the licensing regime rather than anything we can control through the planning consent.
Can I just add as well that the application is, so there's a description, conversion of existing dwelling, erection of extension to create 7 one-bed HMOs. So if it becomes evident that there's more than 7 people living in there, then it also becomes a planning issue, breach of effectively the planning permission. So there's enforcement powers that we can take in order to remedy that situation should it arise.
Yeah, I just brought it up because obviously there's the parking issues as well, if other people can stay permits. So I just find it worrying that, 7, 8 one-bedroom apartments or flats, whatever you want to call them, but there's no definite on whether, they can all receive parking permits.
Yeah, I suppose I've just had a quick look on the council's parking permit websites. There's nothing specifically in relation to parking permits, so I can't see why there would be a limitation. But I would suppose that there'd be a vetting process where people would go through and they'd apply for a parking permit if and so where they would need one. That doesn't get away from the fact that obviously we've assessed the application in terms of sustainability credentials. And as Mark has pointed out, it scores quite highly in terms of its sustainability credentials, in terms of locations to shops, services, hospitals, GP surgeries, bus routes, town centre. So there are other sustainability measures in place that would encourage people to use cycle to work or walk into town or walk to bus stops that would alleviate some of those concerns.
Thank you for that, Gary. I've got Councillor Stapleton, then
But
Councillor
that is just assumptions again, isn't it?
Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. Really simple question. Is parking in relation to HMOs a material planning consideration?
Yes, is a quick answer. Parking, traffic are material planning considerations. We've obviously assessed, as I've said, the sustainability credentials of this site and have taken the view that given the permitting scheme that's in place and how sustainably located it is, there isn't a requirement for them to provide on-street parking.
Thank you. And I'm going to assume that from a licence that they issue permits, obviously if they calculate this, example 42 spaces, they're not going to issue more than 42 parking permits for residents that live on that street. No idea what it's like at night. So obviously when we visited, the street was half empty during the daytime. I appreciate that because people are at work and an evening. I think the thing is the amount of weight that we put on that material planning has been mitigated by the officer's report and the assessment there. So I'm not particularly concerned about that, and everything else really is down to licensing and issuing the permits, which then that's outside of our remit. But I'm pleased to hear that it is covered. As Councillor was pointing out there about the occupancy usage, that there is a enforcement there. So that's encouraging. Thank you.
Councillor Beach.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That's Councillor Stapleton has more or less covered what I wanted to say. But I mean, we're saying 8 flats, but in actual fact, one of them, though design says 1 bed, it is actually showing a double bed. So theoretically, there could be 9 people there. But when we went on Friday morning to visit, if everyone was at home, you'd be hard pushed to have put 9 extra cars there then. On top of which, looking over Councillor Cox's shoulder, the parking permit thing is limited in the daytime. And so if somebody works nights, they're also in a bit of a hole because it's limited time limited to 2 hours in the daytime. So if you work nights and you want to go to bed, you're stuck then really. So, although it's to do with licensing, I think people who rent these or go to live in these places, should it be passed, need to be aware of that because a lot of people work funny hours these days.
It does state within the report that they would have to be made aware that it is permits for parking. It does state that in the report. Do we have any other questions? Therefore, is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to condition? Is there someone to move that recommendation? That's been moved by Councillor Stapleton. Is there a seconder for that proposal? I'll second that proposal. Those in favour of the proposal? Those against? 5. Therefore, what we need now, because obviously the recommendation from the officer has been rejected, we need those that have actually voted against the recommendation to put forward their reasons for objecting and rejecting the application. Pardon? Therefore, those that have rejected the offer, you now need to put forward a... Can you put your microphone on?
There's little information on the parking permit issues. We don't know if there's parking provision there. So mine is basically around the parking and the parking permit issues. Whether everybody in the house can actually receive a parking permit, because if they can't, then there is going to be major parking issues.
So the impact on highways, are there any other issues that you would want to raise for this motion? Councillor Beach?
Yes, taking on what Mr Maddox said, I do worry about the insulation or whatever between all those units that are voted to number 20 and whether they will, be sufficiently insulated or have acoustic barrier or whatever to stop the noise filtrating through the walls, because a lot of those older properties are only single brick walls. So that's what worries me about it, the people who've got to probably put up with awful thumping noise a lot.
So therefore, we've got noise and we've got the parking permits. Councillor Cox?
I support what Councillor Anderson said. As living within the area of this application, it took the residents of Wheatley a long time to get a permit system in place, and it obviously benefits the residents. Looking on site, on the council site, as Harris has already said, looking over my shoulder, each resident can apply for a permit which would potentially give 9 cars the ability to park on that road. And same as Gary said, Councillor Stapleton said, it was quiet when we went. We don't know what it's like on an evening. So with that amount of cars and obviously the information that hasn't been gained through parking, I completely support Bob in what he's saying about parking and a reason to not grant this.
So therefore, you're wanting to put the motion forward to reject the application based on issues surrounding parking and noise. And is that what you're moving? Stacey or Gary?
If I can just touch on the parking issue, and I'm sure Gary will add to it, and then perhaps cover the noise issue. So, parking permits are something we can request in terms of more information if you're wanting that. So, you may consider a deferral. I appreciate you've already deferred for further information, but I think an outright refusal, we would struggle to substantiate that there, because you've heard what Gary said about this being in a sustainable location and all the rest of it. And if it's just simply that you want information about parking permits, that is something we can get very quickly. And I think that as a reason in itself is quite a poor one that we would struggle to defend because of the sustainability point. So I just wanted to cover that off on that, but I think Gary will probably want to add to it and possibly say something about insulation.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. I agree. That is something that we could probably lay our hands on quite quickly, certainly before the next planning committee, if you were minded to defer it. Just in relation to the noise and disturbance to neighbouring properties, mindful that obviously without wanting to kind of retread old ground, the Article 4 direction came into place, but the government through the use class order allows for conventional dwellings to be converted to HMOs or used as HMOs for up to 6 individuals. This is obviously for 7, albeit that you've got the outbuilding as well. So you've only got one more really than what would be conventionally accepted without requiring a change of use application. So the Article 4 directions in place, which was there really to stop proliferation of these HMOs from taking place and having a cumulative impact where you've got row after row after row of HMOs. Notwithstanding that, I'm obviously mindful of the concerns that you've got about noise and disturbance. There are conditions that you could probably attach if you were minded to approve, but obviously that motion's fallen. But it's certainly something that we could investigate as to whether we could look at noise insulation as a form of a planning condition. And again, we could explore that if members were minded to defer the application.
So, Councillor Anderson, would you want to do the motion to reject the application, or would you like a deferral for further information?
I'd still like to reject it. I mean, we read the papers in front of us. It says here, the road is made up of residential dwellings. It has street parking provision in place that requires parking permits, and that will be made clear to future residents of the HMOs. But it hasn't been made clear because we don't even know if every resident can receive a parking permit. So we're going on the information. That should have been in here. We should have had that information before. So even the residents that move in, you're not sure whether they can receive a parking permit. So it's all right making them clear that they have to apply for a parking permit, but we're not clear if they'll actually get one. So we're going on the information that's in here. So I'm sorry, I'm happy with my original decision.
Okay, therefore, there's a motion being put forward by Councillor Anderson. Is there a seconder for the motion? That's being seconded by Councillor Cox. Can we have a show of hands in favour of the motion then, please? 1, 2, 3. So we've got 4 in favour of the motion. Those against? And do we have any abstaining? 1 abstaining. I want to take on board the comments that Councillor Anderson has taken. I personally feel it wouldn't be right to reject an application based on something we could clarify for further information. And I think you've raised a valid point regarding the permits and how that information is provided. And I think Councillor Beach again regarding, I mean, there is always the worry about the community cohesion and the impact on our community. And I think one of the main things is around parking and everything. So am I okay to put forward a third motion where we actually defer that application? Yeah, therefore I'm going to use my casting vote to go against the motion, and I'm going to put forward that we actually defer for further clarification for information regarding the parking permits, and we can also get clarification about the number of parking spaces along that street, how many permits have already been given, and the impact on this application. Is there a seconder for that? And also regarding the impact on community cohesion through noise and the insulation, for clarification on that as well, to be made clearer for the committee. Therefore, I move that. Is there a seconder for that, please? Thank you. Can we have show of hands in favour of that motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that 7? Against? 2. Therefore, we've agreed that the motion be deferred for some clarification around the parking permits and the noise. Thank you very much. Application number 2 is application 22/00848/FULM, which is the erection of 38 residential units and 56 extra care homes, including landscaping and access on land on the northeast side of Sanford Road in Balby, Mel Roberts is the planning case officer who will introduce this item. Mel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I can just go through pre-committee amendments, there's a slight change to the description. So we're proposing that the reference to extra care homes is removed and replaced with retirement living homes. The reason for this is because the level of care proposed within these types of accommodation is more akin to retirement living rather than extra care. Extra care involves a bit more than what this is offering in terms of facilities within the accommodation. So we're suggesting the change to the description and any references to extra care homes within the report change to retirement living. It's just clarification on that. And we've got requests to speak from Kat Crisp and Andrea Bruff of Together Housing, who are speaking in support of the application. So this is an application for the erection of 38 houses and 56 retirement living homes, totaling 94 in total. So the 38 houses are in the eastern half of the site, which, as you're looking at that plan, is actually the top half, because it's a funny orientation with north to the left. So that's at the top half of that site plan. And they are affordable rent properties and are all two-storey houses. In the western half of the site, which is the bottom half, these are the retirement living homes, and they comprise 13 bungalows, which hopefully you can just make out there, which are just above the 43 apartments, which are in a 3-storey building, which you can see in that L-shaped building at the bottom there. It's worth making clear that the proposal is for 100% affordable housing, so all of these properties are going to be affordable. In terms of the access, it's taken from Sunningdale Road, which is at the bottom of the site plan there. And there's also a pedestrian access going to be from Cross Bank, which is just to the north of the properties there from Coronation Road on the left-hand side of the plan. That will have a pedestrian access in through there. The scheme provides for open space in the southeast corner of the site, which is the top right-hand corner of that plan. And that carries on around the southern edge of the site, where there's basically a 10-metre buffer from the drainage ditch that runs along the southern boundary. And it also runs through the centre of the site in line with a power line that runs through the centre of the site. There's also a landscape garden provided for the retirement living flats, just at the bottom there of that L-shaped building. Just to point out, the number of dwellings and the proposed layout has significantly changed since its original submission, and that's mainly due to the constraints on site. So the constraints on site include there's a standoff distance required from the wastewater facility to the south, which has meant the bit where the open space is, you can't put housing on that bit, so that's a constraint. You've got the constraint of the power lines running through the centre of the site in an east to west direction, and also, as I've mentioned, there's a standoff distance required from the drain that runs along the southern boundary of the site. So the original submission was for the erection of 76 dwellings and 43 retirement living apartments, making a total of 119 units, but the current scheme has been reduced by 25 than originally applied for. Just in terms of the site itself, there you can see the application site and a bit of an L shape. You've got another application that's just come in for housing directly to the north of this site, as shown on that aerial photo. Just in terms of the surrounding land uses, you've got an existing area of open space just to the northwest of the site, which you can see there in the top part of the aerial photo. You've got residential properties to the north. Beyond this other application for housing, you've got industrial, which you can see there. To the east is vacant land. To the south, you've got the wastewater treatment facility there, which I've highlighted. Allotments next to those, and then directly abutting the site to the south, you've got a residential park home site. And to the west, you've got a children's nursery and Lidl as well. Just talk you through a few photos of the site. This is where the access is going to come in off Sunningdale Road. It's just going to be an extension to that road. On that photo, you've got the back of the properties on Coronation Road, which are facing the site. This is looking towards the southern boundary of the site. I'm not sure if you can pick it out there, but in the distance you can see the waste treatment facility there, and also you can just pick out the roofs of the some of the mobile homes there. And you can also see the power line crossing the site there as well. This is looking towards the eastern boundary of the site. Just one thing to note on that picture is that there are problems with fly tipping on the site. And this is the existing track that runs along the back of the houses on Coronation Road, which is outside of this application site but directly adjoining it. So just to quickly run through the planning issues, in principle the site is allocated for housing in the local plan and is therefore acceptable in principle. The site is in a sustainable location with a range of facilities and services within walking distance of the site. There are bus stops nearby, as you can see there on Sanford Road and also on Bulby Road. Just to take you through the different house types that we've got, these are the street scenes showing the types of housing on the 38 houses, all two-storey properties. It's just a typical elevation of the bungalows and a floor plan. This is the apartment block, which is 3 stories high. And that's the ground floor plan of the apartment block. Just something to pick out here is that accommodation includes an office where a local housing manager will be based, and that manager will offer support to residents as and when required. There's a communal lounge and also an area for storing mobility scooters. Just really from all the other issues you can see in the report, they've all been resolved, including highways, drainage, maintaining adequate separation distances to surrounding properties. In terms of a Section 106 agreement, there'll be a requirement for one to ensure that all the properties are affordable. There's a small contribution to signals as requested by highways, and a returnable travel bond, which will be used in case the traffic levels are higher than envisaged. The scheme is part grant funded by Homes England, and the applicant has submitted a viability assessment to show that it would not be viable to achieve biodiversity net gain 10%. And that's all been checked. So in conclusion, the site is allocated for housing in the local plan, is in a sustainable location and will provide much needed affordable housing of the type that is required. Although a petition was submitted in opposition to the application, this was against the original scheme rather than the revised application. And when we re-advertised the application, there were no further comments made against the reduced proposal. So it's therefore recommended that planning permission be granted subject to the 106 agreement and the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you for that, Mal. We've got Miss Katrina Criff, the agent, and Miss Andrea Bruff, the applicant, have requested to speak in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you've concluded your submission, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you for giving Together Housing the opportunity to speak in support of our application today. Together Housing has a long-established relationship with Doncaster Council, and we've been developing and providing new affordable homes for Doncaster people for many, many years now. We successfully manage a large number of homes within the Doncaster area, and we continue to be committed to a long-term presence here. We will allocate these new homes through Doncaster's letting system, where homes will be offered to people who are registered with the council and are recognised as being in housing need. We will work with the council to ensure that the most suitable lettings policy is adopted for this scheme, and we are very experienced in finding that right solution, whether that be for general lettings or for lettings based on local connections through a local lettings policy. These new modern family homes will provide a standard of accommodation that allows Doncaster families to live in well-insulated, warm and efficient homes that are free of gas. This scheme is to be delivered as part of Together Housing's strategic partnership with Homes England, using our affordable housing grant to supplement Together Housing's loan facilities for new build homes. Homes England are fully supportive of this scheme, and we've allocated significant levels of grant from our programme to ensure it can be delivered. This will add to our ongoing development commitments in Doncaster and further add to the millions of pounds of Homes England grant that we've chosen to direct to this Doncaster area.
Good afternoon. I'm here from Stantec, acting as agents for Huber Urban Partnerships, Together Housing and Housing 21 in support of our application for residential development. As you already know, this site is an existing residential allocation which has now come forwards for development. We're proposing to deliver 38 units and 56 retirement living homes here. The development will be 100% fully affordable and has been significantly reduced since its original submission. We've spent the last 16 plus months in discussions with officers at Doncaster Council putting together the scheme before you today, coming to this final agreed solution. The proposed development is highly sustainable and a high quality design that will deliver much needed affordable retirement living homes within Doncaster. We also have a mix of M42 and M43 compliant dwellings. The design of the scheme has been through a significant iterative process with officers to ensure a successful and enduring design. The scheme includes 0.68 hectares of public open space above policy requirements, creating a large central area for residents to mix and socialise, and also including areas for young people's play, and a separate private dementia and elderly friendly landscaped area around the apartments. The landscaping will help to integrate and assimilate this scheme into the surrounding landscape. The constraints of the site have resulted in a reduction in biodiversity net gain. However, the landscaping proposed includes, where possible, biodiversity-friendly planting, including mixes of wildflower and other habitats, helping to encourage biodiversity back into this site. The management of this will be secured via a condition. The layout of the site accommodates the constraints of overhead power lines and easements required to the watercourse and existing sewers. The layout, as a result, also promotes a pedestrian-friendly environment. The transport assessment submitted has demonstrated that there will be no adverse impact resulting from the development, and a sufficient amount of car parking is provided. Each property will also be provided with a fully electric vehicle charging point. The benefits of this scheme include, but are not limited to, its highly sustainable location, construction, jobs and related supply chain benefits. It's a fully affordable scheme, contributions towards improving local junctions, new and improved pedestrian connectivity in and around the site. All new homes will be a higher standard to reduce energy demands, with no gas proposed on the site. All properties comply with nationally described space standards and benefit from appropriate levels of amenity internally and externally in gardens. The development will also help to stop further littering and antisocial behaviour behind existing properties to the south. It is clear that there are significant benefits from the development proposed. The scheme is recommended for approval by planning officers, and we hope that you can also look to support this scheme today.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions that we would like to ask? No? Thank you for your submission. Right, committee members, we're now going into a debate. Do any members wish to comment on the report or ask the planning officer a question? I'm going to start with Councillor Stapleton, then Councillor Hogarth, then Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. I've got grave concerns about this application, not the application itself. What I've just heard from the speakers is very positive. However, as you no doubt away from our pre-meeting yesterday, I highlighted the fact that these are not extra care homes. That's now been changed to retirement living homes. My concern here is the period of consultation with members of the public. And I've noted in here that letters were sent out to 94, about the 94 residential units, re-advertising to the neighbouring properties, and there were no further objections or comments made. No, but they're basing that on what they believe to be extra care homes, not just retirement homes, as you're now saying. Now, to me, that's no different to saying, oh, we're going to do a rehabilitation centre, but then at lastminute.com, we're going to change that and we're going to just call it a gym. There's a big difference between an extra living and what we've got now. And my concern here is on procedure, that this has not been advertised to the public. And at this stage, I'm not willing to support this because it hasn't gone out to public consultation on exactly what this is that's being proposed.
Thanks for that, Councillor. Yeah, I take on board what you're saying. The only thing I would say in response to that, in planning terms, we'd consider this to be very similar. They're basically C3 housing, it's residential, so the nature of the use isn't changing. It's just the level of care, really, which isn't necessarily a planning matter in terms of what that level of care is. I agree that the description's not exactly right when it was re-advertised, but it's just whether it requires re-advertising, given that all the information was there for people to see in terms of what the level of care was within the accommodation. It's still classed as residential, it's still a C3 use, whether it's extra care or retirement living. And really it wasn't raised as an issue by anyone anyway in terms of whether the care should be at a particular level. So we as planners wouldn't necessarily see the need to reconsult on that basis. However, take on board what you say.
Chair. Yeah, the way I look, it's not a planning issue. It's not about planning. It's about a failure to consult the public, who will know, they will have an idea in their mind what extra care scheme is. If they're not sure, they may well have gone to DMBC's website, where it's specified exactly what an extra care living scheme consists of. So they would have been able to go and find that out. So if they're coming back, looking at what the proposal is, bearing in mind that that's what they think is going to happen, they may well decide not to object to it because they would welcome that. It feels like they're being sold a pup because that's not what they're getting. It's basically, and I understand from the classifications it's the same, but that's not my point. My point is the public have not been told exactly what this is, and it's whether it's just a genuine error. I would thought somebody would have actually questioned before I did. But I'm not going to vote for this because I don't think the public have been given a chance to actually be consulted on it.
Thank you. Sorry, I just want to elaborate slightly on what Mel says. I think what Mel's getting at is that he accepts that the description refers to the scheme as extra care. But when you go and look at the consultation documents and the application documents, it is clear that what is being provided is retirement living. And what is meant by that, I think, is that these units will have a communal living area and I think scooter storage. And it's not going to have all the extra things you would expect with extra care. And so I think Mel's taken the view that actually when you drill down into the detail of what is on public access in terms of application documents, it is very clear it is retirement living and not extra care. So I think that's probably why he's saying he doesn't really see the issue about the advertising. That said, if members feel very strongly about the application and want it to be re-advertised, we can do that. We can defer it to a later committee if you prefer to do it that way. It is a matter of judgment for the planners, and I don't have a particularly strong feeling about it either, but if you do, that is something we can look at.
Thank you. I understand exactly what you're saying. The thing is, at some point, somebody's used that phrase, and I'm assuming it's the applicants. Now, given who the applicants are, they should know the difference between extra supported living and what we've actually got on the table. They should know that. So I don't know whether that was done deliberately to mislead. I've no idea. It may have been a very innocent thing that nobody's thought about it. But the reality is it's two completely separate things. And what was originally described and advertised is defined by DNBC on their website. Anybody can go and read it and see exactly what it is. I would actually like to, Chair, I'd like to propose a motion. This is deferred until it's re-advertised with the correct information.
Fully understand what you're saying, Councillor Stapleton. I'm just going to, because obviously we've got two people that have already put up to speak, and I'd like to see what their views and opinions are. So I'm going to go to Councillor Hogarth.
Yes, I know there's nobody here from ecology. I wonder, have they withdrawn their objection?
I don't know if they're necessarily objecting. What they're saying is, if, to meet policy requirements, there would be a requirement for a contribution to achieve 10% net gain, and that's set out in the report. I think it's somewhere around 9 units, or it would be the equivalent of around 220 something thousand pounds. So they're not objecting as such. What they're saying is, to meet policy, that would be the requirement that we'd need to achieve 10% net gain. What we're saying as planners is, yeah, we get that. That's what it should be. However, it's not viable to do that, and therefore we're looking at it in the round and taking a balanced judgment as to whether the need for affordable housing is greater than biodiversity net gain. So I don't know if they're necessarily objecting or not. They're just saying what the position is, which we agree with, but we're saying we can't have everything. We can't have. They've shown it's not viable, and the policy allows us to come to a view that if it's not viable, then we can forego that contribution.
Well, it says, ecology have raised no objections subject to the scheme achieving 10% biodiversity net gain. So, because it hasn't met that, they've objected. And it'd be interesting for them to be here to explain their objection and to clarify.
I think it's another point you raised on the language that's being used within the report. By the statement, it comes across that they would object because the 10% net gain hasn't been achieved. So it does come across as if that would be an objection from them by rights, by the wording. There isn't anything in there to state that they understand about the viability. So again, it's about the language that's used within the report, and I totally understand that, Councillor Hogarth. Councillor Cox.
Thank you. I do agree with Councillor Stapleton, because looking at the proposal that this one's been amended from, within this one, there's no mention of anything from education. There's nobody here to ask, I'm assuming, from education. So, you know, I mean, and I know there are only, 38 properties? So, like we do when there's lots of properties, we'll probably be told that there's none at all, but there's nobody to ask. And in the previous one that it has been amended from, there is a comment from education. So, I agree with Councillor Stapleton that further information needs to go out again, be re-advertised again, and then come back with more information.
Do we have anybody else wishing to make a comment or ask the officer a question?
Yeah, just on the education thing, they've come back and said there's no requirement for any education contribution because there's no need. Well, there's spare places within the school. So if you look at 7.18.
Yep.
They've come back and said there's no requirement for education contribution. So that's always been the case.
Not on the previous one, it isn't.
Is there another question you want to ask, Councillor Cox?
No, it's just on the previous application. Before it was amended from affordable and other words that are in there, it were different, wasn't it? No? Okay, I must have read it wrong.
Okay, right. From where we are now, I get the feeling that there are some concerns regarding this application and the language that's been used to advertise it and within the report. So I'm going to go through as we should. So, is there a mover for the recommendation? No. Therefore, we require an alternative motion, which, thank you, Councillor Stapleton.
Chair, I move that we delay this to give DNBC an opportunity to re-advertise this with the correct description of the development.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stapleton. Do we have a seconder for that? That's been seconded by Councillor Cox. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. So therefore, we've asked for this to be deferred, to go back and be re-advertised, to make sure that it's got the correct description on and the language within the report is accurate. Thank you. Item 6 is appeal decision. This report's for information only. Does any member wish to speak on this? No? Therefore, are we agree with the remove it be noted? Fantastic. Members, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business at today's meeting.